Nobody wants to run out of money in retirement and become a financial burden on their family and on their children. So what do you do though when what you've saved for retirement, your income sources matched against your expenses, is probably going to result in you having a lot more money when you pass away than even when you started retirement? Is dying with a large portfolio really the objective here? Is that the best use of your life? In a recent meeting with a client, we explored the idea of maximizing your ROE, or return on experience, a concept shared by Bill Perkins in his book, Die with Zero. The retirement puzzle is one where we're trying to make the most of our long life and career earnings, and also managing the reality that you don't know when you're going to pass away. So how do you make sure that you balance financial security with maximizing your life? In this video, we're going to explore those concepts. I want to share some of the ideas that we came up with together to help you make the most of your retirement. So without any further ado, let's get right into this video. A few weeks ago, I was having a meeting with some long-term clients of mine. We were looking over their overall retirement situation, how much their portfolio has grown over the years, their income needs, all these sorts of things. And we started talking about, what are they going to do with all of this money? They weren't spending it fast enough, if you believe it or not, to be able to even, really make a dent in their portfolio. And so I started thinking about ways that they might use their money to the fullest, helping their family and that sort of thing. They have a lot of children, and they thought, we could really help our children. It's not always an easy answer to just give people money. And I would say the number one stumbling block for people to kind of get them okay with the idea of either spending more money, doing more vacations or life experiences and helping out family and friends, or donating to charity. The number one kind of stumbling block is, I don't want to give away too much or do too much to where I'm going to financially shoot myself in the foot and become destitute. So my client had actually heard about a book and ended up buying it, called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Great book. She said, "Hey, Mark, will you please read this book and talk about the ideas with me?" So anyway, I ended up getting the book. I thought it was excellent. Bill does a great job of articulating ideas that I have really tried to share for a long time, but he does such a better job than I do. And the number one takeaway from this book is this idea of maximizing your ROE, or return on experience. See, the thing is, whenever we spend money and do something, have a great experience, helping somebody, taking a vacation, that experience is something we get to enjoy for the rest of our life. He calls it a memory dividend. You have an experience, you get a certain level of fulfillment out of that experience, and then every single time that you reflect on that, or you talk about it with friends, or with your family, you're able to kind of re-experience some of that joy that you had when you had the experience in the first place. So if you look at kind of this way of maximizing your overall life, having experiences, and then incrementally each year building up these memory dividends, it's a way of effectively compounding your joy and life fulfillment over time. So that leaves us with the question, okay, so we need to make sure that we're not going to run out of money in spite of the provocative title, Die with Zero. We do want to make sure we're financially secure. So at any point in time, whether you're at the beginning of retirement or some point in retirement, is there a calculation we can make to look at how much do I actually need in order to, have money for the rest of my life? He shares a pretty simple calculation in the book. I'm going to go through that with you right now. And then we're going to apply it to a retiree case study to essentially see, okay, how do we, how can we take somebody who has a certain level of spending and how do we compare that with what they could be spending and how to make more out of their life? So first I'm going to pull up on my screen this net present value calculation that Bill shares in the book. So essentially what we're asking is, if we make some assumptions about, how long you're going to live, and we make some assumptions about inflation and investment returns, is there a number we can come up with for today? What's that pile of money or bucket of money that we need in order to, have enough money for the rest of our life? So what I've done here is, with this example, we've got Tom and Jill, our retirees, and they have a retirement income need of $84,000 a year. They're 60 years old, and with that retirement income need of $84,000, they also have Social Security benefits. So Tom's Social Security benefit is $36,000 a year, $3,000 a month. And then his wife, Jill, has a spousal benefit, half of that, so $18,000 a year. Now, for this little simple example, we're going to assume that they both wait until age 67 to claim. And you can see that here in this column, other income. Put in, like what if, you had a pension or something, but I'm just going to assume they don't have anything like that. By the time we get to age 67, you can see that their income need has grown from $84,000 a year, just going up with inflation, and I set that at 2.5% per year, So by the time they get to 67, that's grown to be about $99,000 per year. Their Social Security benefit is $64,189 total. Now, that number, if you're doing the simple math, is greater than 36 plus 18, but we're factoring in cost of living adjustments, which do apply for Social Security. So over here on the right now, we look at, based off of their income need and their other income sources, how much money will they need each year from their portfolio. So you can see that in year one, they don't have any other income sources, so they need to take their full income need from the portfolio, $84,000. As we go along, you can see that the money from the portfolio is exactly the same as their income need. Once Social Security kicks in, see they need $99,000 to meet their income needs, but since $64,000 is from their other income, they only need $35,000 a year. And so now we can subtract that from what we actually need from the portfolio. And we go through time and you can see that. So the calculation that you can do to figure out how much money they would need at age 60 to provide this lifetime of cash flow is something called a net present value calculation. And so this is a pretty simple formula you can do in Excel. What you need as far as inputs is you need to know what are the cash flows over time, and you need to have an implied rate of return. So we're going to assume 5% for their portfolio. Now, we've already inflation adjusted their cash flow, so I don't need to inflation adjust their rate of return. So 5% is roughly, net of this inflation. It's about a 2.5% net return. And with that, assuming a 5% rate of return, they would need just over $1 million to provide this lifetime of cash flows. Now, I have this running out 35 years, assuming they live to age 94. Is that exactly what they're going to need? Well, not exactly, but it's a good starting point for this analysis because, what if they live an extra 3 years or an extra 5 years? What if they die a little bit earlier? We can play with this number and say, okay, what if the rate of return is a little bit lower, a little bit higher? How much would we need? So just let's have some fun. Let's say that our rate of return is only 4% per year. Well, if we assume that, they don't need $1 million, they actually need about $1,145,000. If we had a higher rate of return, let's call it 6%, then they would need a little bit less, about $900,000. So you can see how the assumptions that you plug into this calculation can impact your number. And we don't know exactly, what rate of return they're going to get. Life's not guaranteed. The market's not guaranteed. There's ups and there's downs. We could have really good years or we could have some bad years. But this can kind of give us a range of, okay, I think this rate of return is conservative and reasonable. And I think these cash flows are representative of what I think I'll actually need or want to spend. Once we've come up with that number, I'm going to turn this back to 5%. For our example, $1 million. Let's say that Tom and Jill have saved up more than $1 million. Well, that can lead them to say, proactively, wow, what else could we be doing with that extra money that we don't technically need? We need about $1 million to kind of secure our own financial situation. And maybe you could even build in a buffer there, maybe an extra $100 or a couple $100,000 just to have a safety net, in case there's long-term care expenses or something like that. But if you have money saved in excess of that, now you can start to think very proactively, wow, how much extra income could we be taking out each month to do other things or, gifts that we could make or, fill in the blank. It's not my job as a financial advisor to tell you what you should do with your money. It's my job as a financial advisor to help you understand how much you can realistically spend and help you basically implement your lifestyle, help you you tell me what you want to do, what's important to you, and then I look at your resources and everything to help optimize it and make it, work as best as possible. So let's go over to our retirement income plan and look at Tom and Jill. They've saved $1.5 million for retirement. Like I said, they're age 60. We know their Social Security benefit amounts. And so let's look at what would happen if they just spend what they need for retirement versus taking a more expansive view as to how much could they be spending proactively to kind of maximize their ROE or return on experience. Okay, so here on the screen, I've got their retirement plan overview, and we're seeing, like I said, they have $1.5 million saved. Their spending budget is $84,000 a year or $7,000 a month. So with this being the plan, you say, okay, great. They have a very safe plan, very, very low likelihood of ever running out of money or, becoming destitute. So let's look at what's realistic. If they just spend this amount, what is that likely to result in as far as, money that they would pass away with over a long retirement, over 35 years. So what we're looking at here is a distribution of potential outcomes. So this analysis, we're looking at market returns going back to 1870 up through the present and looking at all different types of market environments, good ones, bad ones, average ones. And what's most likely is that if they start this plan, they're probably going to pass away with something in the realm of $9 million left over. Now remember, they're starting with 1.5 million. So they're going to pass away with 9, right? And all the while they're taking money out of their portfolio. Now let's look at kind of like a very worst case scenario. Let's say markets are horrible for the next 35 years, which do I think is likely? No. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. So let's look at that worst case scenario. They'd still be basically tripling their money from where they began their retirement. So, this leaves Tom and Jill to say, okay, is tripling our money over our lifetime really what's going to maximize our quality of life? And sure, we can pass that money on to our kids. They have a couple children. They like the idea of helping them in different ways, maybe even doing gifts, helping their grandkids with school and other stuff. But the question then you'd ask is, is waiting until the day you die the best time to give that money to your children? Okay. Something that I think is pretty interesting that Bill talks about in his book, Die With Zero, is the value of a gift, the timing of that. So let's say you wait until you're 90-something years old to pass on money to your children. Well, by the time you're 90-something, your kids are going to be 60-something, or maybe even a little bit older. So will they be able to use the money at that time? Sure, of course. But, they're now at the age where, they're very limited. There's certain experiences and things you can do in life that are time-bound. There's certain things you can only do in your 20s and 30s that you can't do when you're 70 or 80. Right? If you want to take up learn how to ski or something, the best time to do that is when you're younger, not when you're older. Can you do it when you're older? Yes, but it's going to be more expensive. You're going to be limited as to what you can do, right? So certain things are time bound. Or think about, an example of helping your grandkids with, paying for them to go to school or something like that, or helping them with a down payment on a house or something like that. That gift needs to be made at certain time frames in their life. So waiting until, they're basically a retiree to pass on money to them, you've kind of missed the boat of making the largest impact with those dollars. If you think about giving to charity, yes, you could wait until you pass away and pass it on that way if that's something you'd like to do. But think of the impact that could have been having by giving those donations earlier in your life. The people you could have helped, or the problems you could have helped solve by making those gifts earlier on instead of waiting until the very end. So now that we know that doing the net present value calculation for Tom and Jill, they only need about $1 million to kind of secure their own financial retirement, let's look at their spending capacity and come up with a more reasonable spending approach that still maintains financial security for them, because obviously we have to consider that, but then also kind of opens up their aperture to look at what are some other things. How much extra money could we have each year or each month to proactively give or do extra things with? So this second plan I'm going to look at is looking more at, instead of optimizing their plan for a specific number, we're going to optimize their plan for what is their spending capacity. So now, instead of spending something like $7,000 a month net, we're looking at spending closer to $9,000 a month net. So all of a sudden, we can look at their plan and say, you know what, you have an extra $24,000 a year that you could either spend it that way, spend an extra $24,000 a year to do an extra large vacation, or help one of your children or grandchildren with something earlier on in their life when they could really use it. If you maybe reflect on your own experience and think back to your 30s or 40s when you were raising a family and you were younger, how helpful it would have been to get $10,000 or $20,000 from your mom, from your parents, to maybe help with a down payment on a house, or to pay off some student loans, or or something like that. What a large impact that could have had if you were younger. Also, instead of doing it in annual increments like this, they could also look at doing larger gifts, of giving larger amounts, but then still maintaining, okay, we need about $1 million or 1.1 million. So if we're comfortable in living on $7,000 a year, we could spend some of that faster up front, and then in the future we just spend lower. Or we could take kind of a measured approach and just spend extra each year. Now with this, it's important to look at financial security. So let's look at their projected legacy based on this spending plan. So with this spending plan, spending an extra $24,000 net per year, which after taxes, let's say it's an extra $25,000, $26,000 a year, they're still likely to end with about $2 million. Even a worst case scenario is them passing away with something like $1 million left over. So you can see that this is even still a pretty conservative approach. So I think it's realistic that we could explore options of them maybe even spending more or giving more. Now, if you were to do this, the fear that somebody might have is, oh no, what if, markets are bad and all of a sudden I've given away too much? Well, I think that's where using a guardrail approach is very, very helpful to help somebody manage that risk over time. So if if we were to start with an income of about $9,000 a month, when would we know whether or not we needed to maybe increase our spending or maybe needed to pare back? So if we look at the guardrails, here on the left-hand side, we have their starting portfolio value of $1.5 million, which corresponds with $91.60 gross income. Okay, so when would it be maybe rational or maybe we needed to pull back a little bit with their spending? Well, here we see the bottom guardrail. If their portfolio dropped to about 1.1 million, then to keep things on track, okay, maybe we need to pare back about $460 a month, take about a 5% haircut in your income. Now on the flip side, because sometimes we kind of plan for the worst case scenario, I think by nature, but it's sometimes things go better than we're expecting. So what if your portfolio went up to about 1.7? Okay, well you could increase, in this scenario, they could increase their spending by about an extra $1,700 a month, which is huge, right? It's interesting, even in this worst bottom guardrails situation, if their portfolio dropped by $300,000, to keep themselves on track and sustainable, they'd really only need to cut back their spending by about $460 per month, which still puts them above what they need to spend of $7,000. So now you can see how just doing $7,000 a month is such a conservative approach. And that's why these projections show they would end up with such a large balance. So using a guardrail approach is, I think, a very realistic and reasonable way to help somebody kind of manage these dueling priorities of, taking care of your own financial security and then also feeling free to giving yourself, as David Blanchett refers to, giving yourself a license to spend and, feeling okay with proactively increasing your income early in retirement. Frankly, when you're young in retirement, that's when your health is at its best. That's when your family's health is probably at their best, right? So your ability to do things is just so much greater. So now that we've taken a look at this retirement plan, understanding how much you actually need to maintain your own financial security in retirement, and also some of the benefits of increasing your spending earlier on in retirement, hopefully you have a better view of how you can improve your overall retirement plan and really optimize for return on experience to have the best life possible. If this is something you'd like some help with, feel free to click the link in the description. I'd be happy to sit down one-on-one with you to help you maximize your retirement income. So until next time, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.